My name is Caitlin. I'm 35 years old and a single mom to my amazing 8-year-old daughter, Madison. I never thought my brother's wedding would be the event that shattered our family facade. When Madison found that card, labeled Fake Daughter, where her name should have been, I watched her little world crumble before my eyes. The words my brother Eric said next cut deeper than any knife could. Well, it's true. She's not really family. Before I tell you what happened at my brother's wedding that changed everything, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what I did next will make you understand why family isn't always about blood. Growing up, I was always the rebel in our picture-perfect suburban Boston family. My parents had high expectations for both me and my younger brother Eric, but we responded to those expectations differently. I channeled my energy into ballet, becoming quite accomplished by my teenage years. Dance was my escape, my passion, my future. I was even accepted into a prestigious dance program in New York, much to the conflicted pride of my parents, who always wanted me to pursue something more practical. But life had other plans. At 19, during what should have been my breakthrough performance, I suffered a career-ending knee injury. 3 surgeries later, I had to accept that my dream of becoming a professional ballerina was over. My parents, especially my mother, barely concealed their relief. "Now you can go to college like a normal person," she said, not understanding how those words crushed whatever remained of my spirit. Eric, 3 years younger than me, was always the golden child. He did everything right, perfect grades. Business school at Harvard, married his college sweetheart Natalie, and joined a prestigious financial firm in Boston. My parents beamed with pride at his every accomplishment, making it abundantly clear who had chosen the right path in life. After my dance career ended, I moved to Chicago to start fresh. I earned a degree in graphic design, built a modest freelance business, and created a life I was proud of. But something was still missing. I always knew I wanted to be a mother, but at 26, after a series of medical examinations, I received devastating news due to complications from my dance injury and subsequent surgeries. I would never be able to carry a child. The day I learned about my infertility, I called my mother hoping for comfort. Instead, she sighed heavily and said, "This is what happens when you push your body too far with that dancing." No sympathy, no support, just another reminder of my perceived failures. A year later, against my family's wishes, I made the most important decision of my life. I adopted Madison, a beautiful 7-month-old baby girl with curious eyes and a smile that could light up the darkest room. The moment the social worker placed her in my arms, I knew she was mine. Not by blood, but by a bond, far more powerful choice and love. My parents were less than thrilled. "You're not even married," my mother complained during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "How are you going to raise a child all by yourself? And an adopted baby. You don't know what kind of problems she might have." Madison was perfect in every way. As she grew, her personality blossomed. She was thoughtful and creative, with a talent for art that amazed her teachers. Her favorite color was purple, and she insisted on having purple somewhere in her outfit every single day. She loved reading, building elaborate worlds with her toys, and asking questions about everything. So many questions that sometimes I'd jokingly ask if she was preparing to write an encyclopedia. Our life together in our cozy 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago was simple but full of love. We had our morning routine breakfast together while I quizzed her on spelling words, then walking hand in hand to her school before I headed to my shared office space. Evenings were for homework art projects spread across our dining table and bedtime stories, where Madison would often help by adding her own twists to the plot. Being a single mom wasn't always easy. There were nights when I'd collapse into bed, exhausted from juggling client deadlines and parenting responsibilities. There were moments when I wished for a partner to share both the challenges and the joy. But whenever Madison wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "You're the best mom ever," I knew I had made the right choice. My relationship with my family grew increasingly distant. We exchanged obligatory holiday cards and had occasional stiff phone conversations. My parents visited only once after Madison's adoption, spending more time commenting on my cramped apartment than getting to know their granddaughter. Eric was too busy climbing the corporate ladder to maintain more than superficial contact. Madison knew she was adopted. I believed in honesty from the beginning, explaining in age-appropriate ways that she grew in another woman's tummy, but in my heart. We celebrated her family day, the anniversary of her adoption, each year with cupcakes and a special outing. She seemed content with our little family of two, though sometimes she would ask about my parents or Uncle Eric, wondering why they rarely called or visited. "They live far away," I would explain, omitting the painful truth that they had chosen to keep their distance. "But they love you in their own way." I wasn't sure if that last part was true, but I wanted to shield her from rejection. Little did I know that the protective bubble I had created would soon be shattered in the most callous way. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday in early April, an elegant cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. Eric and Natalie were finally getting married after a 5-year engagement. The ceremony would take place at an exclusive oceanfront resort near Cape Cod in June, just 2 months away. I stood in my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my mug, staring at the invitation. Part of me wanted to toss it straight into the recycling bin. The last time I had seen my family together was at my father's 60th birthday 3 years ago. An uncomfortable weekend of forced smiles and thinly veiled criticism about my life choices. Madison bounced into the kitchen, her backpack already on, ready for school. "What's that, Mom?" she asked, eyeing the fancy envelope. "Your Uncle Eric is getting married," I replied, trying to sound neutral. Her eyes widened with excitement. "A wedding? Can we go? I've never been to a wedding before. Do I get to wear a pretty dress?" The questions tumbled out her enthusiasm instantly, making me reconsider my initial reluctance. "I don't know, sweetie. It's in Massachusetts, and it's during school time," I hedged, not ready to make a decision. "Please, Mom. I want to meet Uncle Eric and Grandma and Grandpa. You always look sad when you talk about them." Her perceptiveness caught me off guard. That evening, after Madison went to bed, my phone rang. It was my mother, a rare occurrence that immediately put me on edge. "Caitlin, did you get the invitation?" She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Yes, it came today," I replied. "Well, are you coming? Eric specifically asked me to call and make sure you're bringing Madison. He wants the whole family there." Her tone suggested this was more obligation than genuine desire. "I'm not sure, Mom. It's a long way to travel, and Madison would miss school." She cut me off. "This is your brother's wedding, Caitlin. Family should be present for important events, even if you've chosen to distance yourself from us." I bit back a sharp response about who had actually done the distancing. "I'll think about it," I promised instead. "Your father and I are getting older. We don't know how many more family gatherings we'll all have together." The guilt trip was expertly delivered, as always. After hanging up, I called my best friend Jessica, who had been my rock through the adoption process and knew the complicated dynamics of my family. "They're suddenly acting like they want Madison there. That's new," she commented skeptically. My mother made it sound like Eric specifically requested her presence. "Maybe things are changing," I said, not quite believing it myself. "Or maybe they just don't want to explain your absence to the extended family and friends," Jessica countered. "Just be careful, Kate. I don't want to see either of you get hurt." Despite Jessica's warnings over the next few days, I found myself warming to the idea. Maybe this wedding could be a fresh start. Maybe seeing Madison in person, this bright, loving child who was thriving despite their dire predictions, would finally make them accept her as family. The deciding moment came when Madison and I were having dinner, and she asked again about the wedding. Will there be cake and dancing? Yes to both, I smiled. Can I wear a purple dress? Her eyes shone with excitement. How could I deny her this experience? How could I deny her the chance to know her extended family, flawed as they were? I realized I didn't want to be the barrier between Madison and potential relationships with her grandparents and uncle. Yes, we can go shopping for the perfect purple dress this weekend, I told her, my decision made. The next day, I sent our RSVP booked flights and reserved a hotel room near the wedding venue. Then Madison and I went shopping for the perfect outfits. We found her dream dress at the third store, a lovely lavender gown with a satin sash and subtle sparkles that caught the light when she twirled and twirled. She did right there in the fitting room, her joy contagious. For myself, I chose a simple but elegant navy blue dress, conservative enough to please my mother, but still reflecting my style. I wanted to look confident, successful, unaffected by their judgment. In the weeks before the wedding, I created a special gift for the couple, a handmade photo album chronicling Eric's life from childhood through college, including some rare photos I had kept from our youth. It was both an olive branch and a reminder that despite everything we shared a history. The night before our flight to Boston, Jessica came over for dinner and to give Madison a small bracelet as a travel gift. Remember, she told me as she was leaving, you've built an amazing life here. Don't let them make you feel otherwise. On the plane, Madison could barely contain her excitement, chattering about meeting her grandparents and uncle properly for the first time in her memory. I smiled and engaged with her enthusiasm, all while mentally preparing myself for whatever lay ahead. I was doing this for her, I reminded myself. To give her a chance at a wider family circle, something every child deserves. As our plane descended toward Boston, I squeezed Madison's hand. Ready for an adventure, I asked. Ready, she beamed, blissfully unaware of the emotional minefield we were about to enter. We arrived at the beachfront hotel on Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the Saturday wedding. The resort was breathtaking, sprawling grounds, private beach access, and views of the Atlantic that made even the exhaustion of travel fade away. Madison pressed her face against the taxi window, taking in the luxury with wide eyes. "Is this where princesses stay?" she whispered, and I laughed, momentarily forgetting my anxiety. That feeling of lightness vanished the moment we entered the hotel lobby and saw my mother standing there perfectly coiffed in an expensive pantsuit, her posture rigid as she spotted us. "Caitlin," she said, air-kissing my cheek. Her gaze dropped to Madison, who was half hiding behind me. And Madison, you've grown. The observation was clinical, devoid of the warmth one would expect from a grandmother. Madison, ever polite, stepped forward and extended her hand. "Nice to see you again, Grandma. I like your necklace." My mother seemed momentarily taken aback by Madison's poise. She absently touched the pearl necklace at her throat. "Thank you." It was my mother's. A flicker of something, perhaps genuine interest, crossed her face before she reverted to her practical demeanor. "Everyone's gathering for an early dinner in the private dining room at 6. Don't be late." After checking into our room and freshening up, Madison and I made our way to the restaurant. The private room was already filled with family members, some I hadn't seen in years. Eric stood at the center, with Natalie accepting congratulations and introducing her to distant relatives. My brother had aged well, looking every bit the successful finance executive in his tailored suit. When he spotted us, a genuine smile briefly lit his face before being replaced by something more measured as Natalie whispered something in his ear. "Sis, you made it." Eric came over and gave me a quick, somewhat stiff hug. He then crouched down to Madison's level. "And you must be Madison. I'm your Uncle Eric." Madison nodded shyly. "Congratulations on getting married." "Thank you," he replied, seemingly unsure how to interact with an 8-year-old. "Natalie and I are glad you could both come." But his eyes darted nervously to his fiancée, who was watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. Dinner was a minefield of uncomfortable moments. We were seated at a table with my parents and an elderly aunt who kept squinting at Madison and asking loudly, "Now whose child is this again?" Each time my mother would reply with pointed emphasis, "She's Caitlin's adopted daughter," making sure everyone within earshot understood Madison wasn't biologically connected to the family. Midway through the meal, Natalie's mother, a sharp-featured woman with an artificially tight smile, leaned over to me. "It was so generous of you to adopt. Not everyone could take on someone else's child like that." Her tone made it sound like I had taken in a stray dog, not become a mother. I forced a smile. "Madison isn't someone I took on. She's my daughter." Of course, she replied dismissively. "But you know what I mean. Real motherhood. Biological motherhood. That's a different bond entirely." I felt Madison stiffen beside me, and I realized she was listening. I placed a protective hand on her shoulder and changed the subject, asking about the wedding details. After dinner, the wedding party gathered in a separate room for the rehearsal. Madison and I weren't included, so we wandered out to the beach. She kicked off her shoes and ran along the shoreline momentarily, free from the tension of the evening. "Mom, why does Grandma keep saying I'm adopted when she introduces me?" Madison asked as we sat on the sand watching the waves. I considered sugarcoating it, but decided on honesty. Some people think family is only about sharing the same blood. Grandma is one of those people, but that doesn't make her right. "Uncle Eric seems nice," she offered, digging her toes into the cool sand. "He is nice," I agreed, remembering the brother who had once defended me against neighborhood bullies and helped me practice ballet routines in our backyard. We used to be very close. Life just took us in different directions. When we returned to the hotel, we encountered my mother in the hallway talking to Natalie's parents. Their conversation abruptly halted when they saw us. "Caitlin, a word." My mother pulled me aside while Madison waited by the elevator. "Tomorrow during the bridal luncheon, Madison will need to stay with you. The event is for close family only." "Madison is close family," I countered, keeping my voice low but firm. My mother sighed dramatically. "You know what I mean. Natalie has specific ideas about her wedding, and we need to respect that." "Does that include treating my daughter like she doesn't belong?" I could feel my temper rising. "Don't make a scene, Caitlin. Not everything is about you and your situation." With that, she rejoined the others, leaving me seething. Back in our room, I helped Madison prepare for bed, my mind racing. Already I could see this weekend was going to be more difficult than I had anticipated. As Madison brushed her teeth, I called Jessica. "They're acting like she's invisible," I whispered into the phone, stepping onto our small balcony so Madison wouldn't overhear. Or worse, like she's some kind of interloper. "Are you surprised?" Jessica asked gently. "Come home, Kate. You don't need to subject yourself or Madison to this." I watched through the balcony door as Madison emerged from the bathroom in her favorite pajamas, carefully arranging her stuffed animals on the hotel bed. "I can't," I replied. "She's so excited about the wedding. And maybe Maybe I'm still hoping they'll see what I see when they look at her. After hanging up, I rejoined Madison and read her favorite story. As she drifted off to sleep, I stroked her hair and made a silent promise I would shield her from as much hurt as possible while we were here. But deep down, I feared that was a promise I might not be able to keep. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect June day that wedding photographers dream about. Madison woke up with infectious excitement, immediately asking when she could put on her purple dress. "Not until later, sweetie." "The ceremony isn't until 3 o'clock, I reminded her, ordering room service breakfast to avoid another tense family meal. While we ate, Madison chattered about the day ahead. "Do you think there will be other kids at the wedding? What if they ask me to catch the flowers? Is that the bride or the kids I forget?" Her enthusiasm was both heartwarming and worrying. I didn't want her hopes for a magical day to be crushed by the reality of how some family members viewed her. But I kept my concerns hidden behind an encouraging smile, answering her questions and helping her style her hair in a special way for the occasion. At 1:30, Madison twirled in her lavender dress, admiring her reflection in the mirror. "Do I look like I belong in the family now?" she asked innocently. The question caught me off guard, revealing how much she had already internalized the subtle and not-so-subtle messages of exclusion. "You've always belonged in our family," I assured her, kneeling to her level. "No dress can make that more or less true." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. With one last check of our appearance, we headed down to the resort's garden where the ceremony would take place. The venue was stunning, white chairs arranged on manicured lawns overlooking the ocean, an elegant floral arch where Eric and Natalie would exchange vows, and delicate ribbons adorning the aisle. Guests were already taking their seats, many stopping to greet each other with the animated conversation of people reuniting after long absences. A few of my cousins waved to us, their expressions curious as they took in Madison. I guided her toward the section reserved for immediate family, but before we could sit down, my mother intercepted us. "Caitlin, you're in the third row on the right," she instructed, pointedly looking only at me. "And Madison?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. My mother glanced around as if searching for a solution to an unexpected problem. "Well, I suppose she can sit with you. There just wasn't. We didn't plan for extra seating in the family section." I bit my tongue to avoid creating a scene before the ceremony. "We'll find seats together," I said firmly, taking Madison's hand and moving toward the designated area. The ceremony itself was predictably perfect. Natalie was radiant in a designer gown. Eric looked handsome and genuinely happy, and their vows were tastefully personal without being overly sentimental. Madison watched with rapt attention, occasionally squeezing my hand during particularly romantic moments. As we moved from the garden to the reception ballroom afterward, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps the worst of the awkwardness was behind us. The setting was magnificent crystal chandeliers tables, adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces and floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the ocean view. A string quartet played softly as guests found their assigned tables. Madison skipped ahead of me, eager to find our place cards. "I bet we're at a table right up front," she said confidently. "Since Uncle Eric is your brother." I followed more cautiously, scanning the elegantly arranged escort cards for our names. Madison reached the table first, her small fingers sorting through the cards with careful determination. She froze suddenly, her body becoming unnaturally still. "Madison, did you find our names?" I asked, moving closer. She turned to me, confusion and hurt clouding her eyes, holding up a card that made my blood run cold. Where her name should have been, someone had written "fake daughter" in the same elegant calligraphy as all the other place cards. Mom. Her voice trembled. What does this mean? Before I could respond, she read it aloud, her voice carrying in the momentary lull of conversation around us. Fake daughter. Several nearby guests turned to look, expressions ranging from shock to uncomfortable curiosity. In that horrible moment, Eric appeared beside us, Natalie trailing behind him with a concerned expression. What's going on? He asked, clearly annoyed at the disruption. Wordlessly, I handed him the card. His face flushed, but instead of the outrage or apology I expected, he shifted uncomfortably and muttered, "It's probably just someone's idea of a joke." A joke, I repeated, keeping my voice low but intense. Making my daughter feel like she doesn't belong is funny to you. Look, Caitlin, it's not that big a deal. Everyone knows she's not. Not what Eric, I challenged, acutely aware of Madison's presence and the growing audience of onlookers. He glanced at Natalie, who was anxiously scanning the room, as if measuring the social damage. Well, it's true, he finally said, the words falling between us like stones. She's not really family. Madison's sharp intake of breath cut through me like a knife. I watched her face crumple, the excitement and hope of the day draining away as tears welled in her eyes. Natalie stepped forward, attempting damage control. I'm sure it was just some of my cousins being stupid. They have a weird sense of humor. We'll find your correct place card. But the damage was done. Madison was already backing away from the table, bumping into guests as tears began streaming down her face. I moved to follow her, but not before facing my brother. She has a name, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Her name is Madison, and she is more family to me than any of you have been in years. I found Madison hiding in a bathroom stall, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms, my own tears mingling with hers. Why don't they like me? She whispered against my shoulder. What did I do wrong? Nothing, I assured her fiercely. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Some people just have very small hearts. As I held her, a cold clarity settled over me. I had spent years hoping my family would change, would open their hearts to the amazing child who had transformed my life. I had been willing to endure their judgment of me, but I would not, could not, allow them to wound Madison's spirit with their narrow definition of family. I wiped her tears gently with a tissue. Do you want to leave? We can go right now, head back to Chicago tonight. She hiccuped, considering the option, then surprised me with her response. No, I want to stay. Are you sure, sweetie? We don't have to. Madison straightened her shoulders. A determination I recognized. It was the same stubborn resolve I'd shown throughout my life when facing obstacles. I want them to see that I'm not going to run away. You always tell me that when people are mean, standing tall shows you're stronger than they are. Pride swelled in my chest, momentarily displacing the anger and hurt. My daughter was teaching me about courage in the face of rejection. I nodded, helping her fix her slightly smudged makeup and straighten her purple dress. Then that's exactly what we'll do. We'll stand tall together. Hand in hand, we walked back into the reception, ready to face whatever came next, not as victims, but as warriors protecting something precious, our dignity and our truth. We returned to the reception with heads held high, though Madison's hand trembled slightly in mine. The place card table was now surrounded by members of the wedding party, heads bent together in urgent conversation. My mother stood to one side, her face a mask of controlled distress as she spotted us approaching. Before anyone could speak, I picked up a pen from the table and took one of the blank spare cards. In clear, bold letters, I wrote "Real Daughter" and placed it exactly where the offensive card had been. Mom Madison whispered, a mixture of awe and anxiety in her voice. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's okay. Sometimes we need to correct people's mistakes. My mother stepped forward, her voice low and tense. Caitlin, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The coordinator is arranging new seating. Just take Madison and... No, I cut her off. I need to speak with Eric and Natalie, now. Perhaps it was the unfamiliar steel in my voice, but my mother actually backed down, gesturing toward a small anteroom off the main reception hall. They're in there trying to sort this mess out. I knelt to Madison's level. I need to talk to Uncle Eric and Aunt Natalie alone for a few minutes. Can you wait with Grandma? Madison looked uncertainly at my mother, who made a visible effort to soften her expression. I can show you the cake display, she offered stiffly. After making sure Madison was settled, I entered the anteroom to find Eric and Natalie in tense discussion with the wedding planner and Natalie's parents. Everyone out, except the bride and groom, I announced, surprising even myself with my assertiveness. The wedding planner looked to Natalie for confirmation, then ushered the others out, leaving just the three of us. Once the door closed, I faced my brother directly. What happened out there was unacceptable. Eric ran a hand through his carefully styled hair. Look, it was just a stupid prank. Probably one of Natalie's cousins who had too much champagne before the reception. We're dealing with it. Dealing with it, I repeated, by dismissing it as a joke, by confirming to my 8-year-old daughter that she's not really family. That's not what I meant, he backpedaled, shooting a desperate look at Natalie. Then what did you mean, Eric? Please explain to me exactly what you meant when you said it's true in response to someone calling my daughter fake. Natalie stepped between us, her wedding dress rustling. Caitlin, please. This is our wedding day. We've spent a year planning this. And I've spent 8 years raising a child who deserves basic human respect, I countered. A child who was excited to meet her extended family, who spent weeks picking out the perfect dress to impress all of you. Eric's facade finally cracked. What do you want me to say? That I went along with it because I was afraid of rocking the boat, that Natalie's family has certain traditional views about what makes a real family. That I've been caught in the middle trying to keep everyone happy. I want you to say that you're sorry, I replied. Not to me, but to Madison. And I want you to mean it. Eric looked at Natalie, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I'll apologize to her, he conceded. It was wrong what happened, and what I said. And then what I pressed. We go back out there and pretend everything's fine, while your in-laws and our parents continue to treat Madison like she's somehow less worthy of belonging. Eric's shoulders slumped. What do you expect me to do, Caitlin? Stand up at my own wedding reception and lecture everyone about family values? His words sparked something in me, a realization that perhaps that was exactly what needed to happen. Not from Eric, who had clearly chosen his path, but from me. No, I said, a plan forming rapidly in my mind. I don't expect you to do that, but I will. I left them staring after me in confusion, and returned to the main hall, where guests were now taking their seats at elaborately decorated tables. I found Madison with my mother near the cake, display her expression cautious but calmer. Everything okay? She asked as I approached. It will be, I assured her, leading her to our newly assigned table, which was thankfully on the opposite side of the room from my parents' and Natalie's family. The reception proceeded with speeches from the best man and maid of honor, followed by the traditional first dance. I watched it all with a strange sense of detachment, my mind focused on what I knew I had to do. When the MC announced that dinner would be served shortly, I rose from my seat and walked purposefully to the small stage where the microphones stood. The wedding coordinator moved to intercept me, but I was faster reaching the microphone before anyone could stop me. Good evening, everyone. I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. For those who don't know me, I'm Caitlin, Eric's sister. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. This wasn't on the program. I saw Eric and Natalie exchange alarmed glances from their place at the head table. I wasn't scheduled to speak tonight, but I've realized there's something important that needs to be said about family. I paused, finding Madison's eyes in the crowd. She was watching me with absolute trust, and that gave me the courage to continue. 8 years ago, I made the most important decision of my life. I became a mother to a beautiful baby girl named Madison. Not through the traditional route of birth, but through adoption, through choice and love. And every day since I've been grateful for that choice. I could see my mother shifting uncomfortably in her seat, my father staring stonily ahead. But there were also faces in the crowd showing genuine interest, even support. Today, Madison and I encountered something disturbing. Where her place card should have been, someone had written, "fake daughter." And when confronted with this cruelty, someone suggested that it was somehow true that because we don't share blood, she isn't really family. Gasps and whispers spread through the room. Natalie's mother was frantically whispering to those around her, while Eric sat frozen, his face unreadable. I'm standing here not to create drama or to ruin anyone's special day, but to speak a truth that shouldn't need saying. Family isn't defined by DNA. It's defined by love, by commitment, by showing up for each other day after day. I locked eyes with various relatives around the room as I continued. Some of you have known me my whole life. You've watched me grow up, stumble, fall, and find my way again. And some of you are meeting me in Madison for the first time today. But all of you are witnessing right now what it means to stand up for someone you love. My voice grew stronger, more passionate. Madison is not my fake daughter. She is my real, true daughter in every way that matters. She has taught me more about love, resilience, and joy than I ever could have imagined. And anyone who cannot see that, who cannot open their heart to the beautiful reality of our family, is missing out on knowing an extraordinary human being. I found Madison in the crowd again and saw tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of hurt now. Her eyes shone with pride and love, her small body straight and tall in her purple dress. So I want to propose a toast, I concluded, picking up a water glass from a nearby table. Not just to the bride and groom, although I do wish them every happiness, but to real family wherever and however we find it, to the people who love us for exactly who we are, who lift us up instead of tearing us down, who make space for us at their table and in their hearts, without conditions or qualifications. I raised my glass, and to my surprise, many guests did the same, including several of my cousins, and even a few from Natalie's side of the family. "Thank you," I said simply, then returned the microphone to its stand and walked directly to Madison. She stood and threw her arms around my waist, hugging me tightly. "Mom, I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything in this world." I bent to kiss the top of her head, then straightened to face the approaching figure of my brother. Eric's expression was a complex mixture of anger, embarrassment, and something that looked almost like respect. "You couldn't just let it go, could you?" he asked, but the heat had gone out of his words. "Not when it comes to her," I replied steadily. "Never when it comes to her." He nodded slowly. "I understand that now. I think I've been a coward, Kate." Before I could respond, he turned to Madison and crouched to her level much as he had when we first arrived. "Madison, I'm very sorry about what happened earlier and about what I said. It was wrong and you deserved better from your uncle. Madison studied him for a long moment, her gaze direct, and evaluating in a way that was far beyond her years. Why did you say it if you didn't mean it? She asked simply. Eric winced at the directness of her question. Sometimes grown-ups say things to please other people even when they know better. It's not right, and it's not an excuse. He glanced up at me briefly before continuing. Your mom is braver than I am. She always has been. Madison considered this, then offered him a tentative smile. She's the bravest person I know. I believe that Eric agreed, standing up. Caitlin, about the reception. We're leaving, I told him quietly. We've made our point, and now Madison and I are going to enjoy the rest of our evening somewhere else. He nodded, accepting my decision. Will you be at brunch tomorrow? No, I said firmly. I think it's best if we head home early. As Madison and I gathered our belongings and moved toward the exit, I noticed several guests watching us, with varying expressions, some disapproving, others curious, and a few with undisguised admiration. My mother stood by the door, her face taut with suppressed emotion. You always had to be different, she said as we passed. Always had to make a scene. I stopped and turned to her, suddenly feeling a deep sadness rather than anger. No, Mom. I always had to be authentic. There's a difference. With that, Madison and I walked out of the reception and into the warm evening air, leaving behind the whispers, the judgment, and the narrow definitions that had confined us for too long. As we stepped outside, Madison looked up at me and smiled a real, unburdened smile that made every difficult moment worth it. Where are we going now, Mom? Wherever we want, I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years. Our adventure is just beginning. Instead of returning to the hotel where the rest of the wedding party was staying, I called a rideshare and took Madison to a small bed and breakfast I had spotted in the nearby town. The quaint yellow cottage with its wraparound porch couldn't have been more different from the sleek luxury of the resort. It looks like a dollhouse, Madison commented as we checked in, her spirit already rebounding with the resilience that never ceased to amaze me. The elderly woman who owned the place showed us to a cozy room with twin beds covered in handmade quilts. There's fresh cookies in the dining room if you're hungry, she told Madison with a wink. Wedding party get too wild for you folks. Something like that, I replied, with a tired smile. After Madison had changed into pajamas and was happily munching cookies while reading a book from the B&B's small library, I stepped onto the porch to breathe in the cool evening air. My phone, which I'd silenced during our escape, buzzed insistently in my hand. 12 missed calls and 27 text messages. The fallout had begun. I scrolled through the texts first. My mother. How could you embarrass the family like this? Several from Eric. Call me when you can. Where are you staying now? We need to talk. One surprising message from Natalie. I'm sorry about what happened. Can we speak tomorrow? Just as I was about to put the phone away, it rang again. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. Your brother called me, she said without preamble when I answered. He's trying to find you. How did he even have your number? Apparently he kept it from when we all hung out that one time years ago. He sounds pretty desperate to reach you. I sighed, leaning against the porch railing. I gave a speech at the reception. It wasn't exactly planned. Oh my God, Jessica gasped, then laughed. You went full mama bear, didn't you? What happened? I recounted the events of the evening, the fake daughter card, Eric's callous response, and my impromptu speech. Jessica listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of outrage or support. I'm proud of you, Kate, she said when I finished. And I bet Madison is too. She seems okay now, but I'm worried about the long-term impact. No child should ever have to question whether they're real enough to belong. So, what's your plan now? Head home tomorrow. That's the idea, I confirmed. I don't think there's anything more to be gained by. I was interrupted by another call coming in. Eric again. I should take this, I told Jessica. It's the 13th time he's called in the past 30 minutes. Good luck, she replied. Call me tomorrow before your flight. I switched to Eric's call, bracing myself. Hello? Finally, his voice was a mixture of relief and exasperation. Where are you, Mom? Is having a meltdown. Natalie's parents are furious, and half the guests are talking about nothing but your speech. We're safe, that's all you need to know, I replied evenly. Madison and I will be heading back to Chicago in the morning. There was a pause. Then Eric's voice came again, softer now. I messed up, Caitlin. I know that. What happened with the card was inexcusable, and my response was even worse. Yes, it was. I agreed, not making it easier for him. Can we meet tomorrow? Just to talk before you leave. I owe you and Madison a better apology than what I managed at the reception. I hesitated, torn between protecting Madison from further hurt and wanting to give my brother a chance to make amends. I don't know, Eric. Please, Kate. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Something in his voice, a vulnerability I hadn't heard since we were kids, made me reconsider. Fine. We can meet for breakfast at 9. There's a cafe called Sea Breeze on Main Street in town. But this is for Madison, not for you or me or anyone else. If she seems uncomfortable at any point, we're leaving. Understood. Thank you. After hanging up, I checked on Madison, who had fallen asleep with her book open on her chest. I gently removed it, turned off the light, and settled into my own bed mind, racing with thoughts of the day's events and what tomorrow might bring. Morning came too quickly. I woke to find Madison already dressed, sitting by the window, watching seagulls circle over the town. I told Uncle Eric we'd meet him for breakfast, I said carefully, gauging her reaction. How do you feel about that? She considered the question seriously. Is he still mad about your speech? I don't think so. He says he wants to apologize properly. Madison nodded. Okay. Can I have pancakes at breakfast? Her simple acceptance of the situation humbled me. While I'd spent the night analyzing and worrying, she had already moved into forgiveness and practicality, focused on pancakes rather than grudges. At the cafe, Eric was already waiting at an outside table, looking tired and slightly rumpled in casual clothes rather than his wedding finery. He stood when he saw us, a tentative smile on his face. Thank you for coming, he said, pulling out chairs for both of us. I wasn't sure you would. Madison climbed onto her seat and immediately grabbed a menu. I want blueberry pancakes, she announced, apparently deciding that food took precedence over awkward adult conversations. Excellent choice, Eric replied, visibly relaxing at her straightforward manner. I hear they make the best ones in town here. After we ordered, Eric took a deep breath and addressed Madison directly. I want to apologize again for what happened yesterday. The card was cruel, and what I said afterward was even worse. You are absolutely part of our family, and I should have stood up for you right away. Madison studied him over her orange juice. Why didn't you? Eric glanced at me, then back to Madison. That's a good question. I guess I was scared of disappointing certain people. Natalie's family is very traditional, and they were paying for most of the wedding. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking ashamed. But that's no excuse. I was wrong, and I hurt you, and I'm truly sorry. Mom says everyone makes mistakes, Madison replied solemnly. She says what matters is how you fix them. Eric smiled at her wisdom. Your mom is pretty smart. He turned to me. Natalie wanted to come today too, but she thought it might be easier if it was just me. She feels terrible about what happened. It wasn't her fault, I conceded, unless she was the one who wrote the card. God, no, Eric looked horrified. It was her cousin Daniel's son, a teenager, who thought he was being funny. Natalie's parents reamed him out after you left, and he's been assigned to write you both a formal letter of apology. Our food arrived temporarily, pausing the conversation. As Madison happily dug into her pancakes, I studied my brother. He seemed genuinely contrite, more like the Eric I remembered from childhood than the polished professional who had been keeping me at arm's length for years. "What changed, Eric?" I asked quietly. "After I left last night, what happened?" He set down his fork. "Your speech happened. And then Natalie happened, actually. After you left, she pulled me aside and told me she was ashamed, not of you, but of how her family had behaved, and of how I hadn't stood up for my niece." He smiled ruefully. "She said if we ever have children, she hopes I'll defend them with half the passion you showed for Madison." I was surprised. I thought she was part of the problem. Eric shook his head. She was caught in the middle, trying to keep her parents happy, while also feeling uncomfortable with how things were unfolding. But your speech changed something for her. For a lot of people, actually. Madison, who had been quietly listening while demolishing her pancakes, piped up. "Did they still have cake after we left?" Eric laughed, the tension breaking. "Yes, they did. And dancing. Your mom missed seeing me try to do the chicken dance." "You're terrible at dancing," I remembered a smile tugging at my lips. "Still am," he confirmed. "Some things never change." As breakfast continued, the conversation flowed more easily. Eric asked Madison about school, her hobbies, her friends back in Chicago. She gradually opened up, describing her art projects and the book series she was currently obsessed with. I watched them interact with a mixture of caution and hope. When it was time to leave, Eric walked us to our waiting taxi. "I hope this isn't goodbye for another 3 years," he said, his expression serious. "I'd like to be a real uncle to Madison, if you'll let me." I thought about all the years of distance, the missed opportunities for connection. "It's going to take time, Eric. Trust needs to be rebuilt." "I understand. I'm willing to put in the work." Before I could respond, my phone rang again. It was my mother. I declined the call, but moments later Eric's phone began ringing. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. "They haven't stopped calling since last night," he admitted. "Mom and Dad, Natalie's parents, various relatives, all wanting to know if I've talked sense into you yet." I tensed. "And have you?" "No," he said firmly. "I've been telling them that I'm the one who needed sense talked into me." He crouched down to Madison's level. "Your mom stood up for what's right yesterday. It's a lesson I won't forget." Madison, in her 8-year-old wisdom, patted his shoulder reassuringly. "It's okay, Uncle Eric. Mom says learning is what makes us grow." Eric's eyes glistened suspiciously as he stood. "She's right about that, too." He helped us load our bags into the taxi. Safe travels, and Caitlin. Thank you for giving me a second chance. As our taxi pulled away, Madison waved until Eric was just a distant figure on the sidewalk. "I think I like having an uncle," she decided. "Even after everything that happened." She nodded with the certainty only children possess. He said sorry, and he meant it. And he asked questions about me and remembered the answers. That's what real family does right. Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, marveling at her capacity for forgiveness and her intuitive understanding of what truly constituted family bonds. At the airport, my phone continued to buzz with messages and calls, some hostile, some conciliatory, some from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, expressing support for my stand. I answered none of them, focusing, instead, on getting us home to Chicago, back to our comfortable routine and the life we had built together. It wasn't until we were finally on the plane, Madison already absorbed in a movie on the seatback screen, that I allowed myself to truly process everything that had happened. I had gone to the wedding hoping for reconciliation, for Madison to be embraced by my family. Instead, I had found the strength to define family on our own terms, to demand the respect we deserved, rather than accept the scraps of acknowledgement offered. As the plane rose above the clouds, I felt a similar lifting in my spirit. For the first time since adopting Madison, I no longer carried the weight of seeking my parents' approval or trying to fit into their narrow definition of family. We were flying home, not defeated but liberated, ready to move forward with those who truly valued us and without the burden of those who didn't. Madison fell asleep against my shoulder, somewhere over Pennsylvania, her face peaceful in slumber. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, overwhelmed with love for this child, who had taught me so much about courage, authenticity, and the true meaning of family. The fallout from the wedding would continue for weeks. I knew that. But whatever came next, we would face it together, stronger for having stood our ground, clearer about who deserved a place in our lives, and uncompromising in our knowledge that our mother-daughter bond was as real and valid as any other. 6 months after the wedding incident, Madison and I were decorating our apartment for the holidays, hanging colorful lights around the windows while Christmas music played softly in the background. So much had changed in that short time. Yet the core of our life, our bond as mother and daughter, remained steadfast and strong. "Mom, can we hang the purple ornaments on this side?" Madison asked carefully, arranging glass baubles on our modest tree. "Of course, sweetheart. Your artistic eye is better than mine anyway." I smiled, watching her meticulously place each ornament with the seriousness of a museum curator. The aftermath of the wedding had been both challenging and surprisingly healing. As expected, my parents had reacted with anger and disapproval to my speech and early departure. For weeks, my mother left voicemails, alternating between guilt trips and demands that I apologize to Eric and Natalie for disrupting their special day. What she didn't know was that Eric and I had begun rebuilding our relationship through weekly video calls, with Madison eagerly joining to show off her latest art projects or school achievements. My brother had been true to his word, making genuine efforts to be present in our lives, despite the geographical distance. The most unexpected development had come 2 months after the wedding, when Natalie called to share news of her pregnancy. "We want Madison to be involved," she had said, her voice warm with sincerity. "Every child deserves cousins who love them, and our baby will be lucky to have Madison as family." The transformation in my professional life had been equally significant. The courage I had found to stand up for Madison at the wedding had spilled over into other areas. I had finally taken the leap to open my own graphic design studio, instead of continuing as a freelancer, converting a small storefront just a few blocks from our apartment. Business was steadily growing, allowing me to be more selective about clients and projects while maintaining a schedule that prioritized Madison. "Uncle Eric said they're coming for New Year's," Madison commented, interrupting my reflections. "Will Grandma and Grandpa come too?" The question was asked casually, but I knew it carried weight. My parents had maintained their distance after the wedding, though there had been small signs of thawing in recent weeks. A birthday card for Madison that acknowledged her as their granddaughter, without the qualifier, adopted a brief phone call on Thanksgiving that was civil, if not warm. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. Uncle Eric invited them, but they haven't decided yet." I joined her at the tree, helping to hang the star on top. "How would you feel if they did come?" Madison considered this seriously. I think it would be okay. Everyone deserves second chances, right? That's what you always tell me. Her wisdom continued to humble me. Yes, that's right. Though sometimes second chances come with boundaries to protect ourselves. Like the time I gave Jamie another chance at being my friend, but told her she couldn't borrow my special markers anymore after she lost them, Madison asked, drawing a parallel to a recent playground conflict. Exactly like that, I laughed, amazed at how she could distill complex emotional concepts into perfectly relatable 8-year-old terms. The healing process hadn't been easy for either of us. In the weeks following the wedding, Madison had experienced nightmares and occasional bouts of insecurity, questioning her place in the world in ways no child should have to. I had found a child therapist who specialized in adoption issues, and those sessions had proven invaluable. I too had sought support, joining a group for adoptive parents, where I could share experiences with others who understood the unique challenges we faced. The community I found there became an extended family of sorts, offering wisdom, encouragement, and solidarity when needed. One particularly meaningful connection had been with Sarah, another single mom by choice, who had adopted her son from foster care. Our families had begun spending time together regularly, the children bonding over their shared experiences, while Sarah and I discovered a friendship that felt like it had existed for decades rather than months. "Do you think we could invite Sarah and Tyler for Christmas dinner?" Madison asked, as if reading my thoughts. "I was just thinking the same thing," I replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Great minds think alike." The doorbell rang, interrupting our decorating. Madison ran to answer it, checking through the peephole as we had practiced. "It's Uncle Eric!" she called excitedly. I opened the door to find my brother standing there with a large box in his arms, his cheeks red from the December cold. "Special delivery," he announced, stepping inside and setting down his burden. "Natalie sent homemade cookies, and I bring news." Madison immediately investigated the box, discovering not only cookies, but also a small wrapped gift with her name on it. "Can I open it?" she asked, looking between Eric and me. "Go ahead," Eric nodded, smiling at her enthusiasm. Inside was a framed photograph of our extended family, from generations back: great-grandparents, great-aunts, and uncles and cousins, several times removed. Around the edge of the mat, someone had carefully written, "Family comes in many forms. You are part of this story now and always." Natalie found it in her grandmother's attic, Eric explained quietly as Madison examined the photo. The old lady had a change of heart after meeting Madison at the post-wedding brunch. Said she'd forgotten what family was really about until she saw how fiercely you protected your daughter. The gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. That's really thoughtful." "There's more," Eric continued. "Mom and Dad have asked if they can come for Christmas. Not just New Year's, but Christmas Day. They want to bring gifts for Madison. Real gifts, not the impersonal gift cards they usually send." I felt a complex mixture of emotions, hope, wariness, the protective instinct that had only grown stronger since the wedding incident. "What do you think? Is it genuine?" Eric shrugged. "I think the wedding was a wake-up call for a lot of people. Mom's been asking questions about adoption, reading books. Dad mentioned feeling ashamed when he realized how they'd been treating their only grandchild." He glanced at Madison, who was now showing the photo to her favorite stuffed animal. "People can change. Not overnight, and maybe not completely, but they can try." "Like you did," I acknowledged softly. "Like I'm trying to," he corrected, with a self-deprecating smile, "every day." After Eric left promising to return with Natalie for our holiday gathering, Madison and I returned to our decorating. As she carefully arranged the nativity scene on our bookshelf, she asked Mom, Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever love me like you do? The question caught me off guard with its directness. I don't think anyone will ever love you exactly like I do, I answered honestly. But I think they're beginning to understand what they've been missing by keeping you at a distance. And I hope they'll discover how amazing it is to truly know you. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. I'm glad we went to the wedding, she said after a moment. You are. Even after what happened. Yes, she said confidently, because if we didn't go, nothing would have changed. Uncle Eric wouldn't call us every week. Aunt Natalie wouldn't be sending cookies. And you wouldn't have opened your studio. I stared at her in amazement. What does the studio have to do with the wedding? Madison looked at me as if the connection was obvious. You got brave, Mom. You stood up to everyone for me. And then you weren't afraid to do other brave things, too. Her insight left me momentarily speechless. She was right, of course. The wedding confrontation had been a catalyst pushing me to stand firm in other areas of my life where I had previously compromised or hesitated. Christmas Day arrived with a light snowfall that turned Chicago into a picture-perfect holiday scene. Our apartment was warm and fragrant with the smell of baking, thanks to Madison's insistence that we make cookies from scratch rather than buying them. Sarah and Tyler would be joining us for dinner, along with Eric and Natalie, and most nervously, my parents. They arrived promptly at 4, standing awkwardly at our door, with carefully wrapped packages and tentative smiles. My mother had aged visibly in the months since the wedding, the lines around her mouth deeper, her posture less rigid than I remembered. My father, always quieter and harder to read, carried a large gift bag with purple tissue paper, Madison's favorite color. Merry Christmas, my mother said, her voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. Thank you for having us. Madison approached them with cautious optimism. Merry Christmas, Grandma and Grandpa. I made name cards for everyone at the dinner table. She held up handcrafted place cards, each decorated with personalized drawings. My mother knelt down, something I couldn't remember her doing before, to examine the cards. These are beautiful, Madison. You're quite the artist. Mom says I get my creativity from her side of the family, Madison replied. Did you like art when you were my age? A flicker of surprise crossed my mother's face, followed by something softer. I did, actually. I used to draw all the time, though my parents didn't much encourage it. This small revelation that my mother had once been a creative child whose talents went unsupported explained so much about her relationship with me and my artistic pursuits. It was a tiny window into a person I had never fully understood. The evening unfolded with less tension than I had anticipated. Eric and Natalie arrived with more gifts and sonogram pictures of their unborn child. Sarah and Tyler brought warmth and easy conversation, having no history or baggage with my family. Madison moved between the adults with growing confidence, sharing stories, and showing off her room with its walls covered in artwork. After dinner, as everyone gathered in the living room for dessert, my father quietly handed Madison a wrapped package. This is something special, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Your grandmother and I wanted you to have it. Madison carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a leather-bound photo album. On the cover, embossed in gold, were the words, Our Real Granddaughter. She opened it to find photographs I had never seen before. My parents, in their youth family gatherings, from decades past, my own baby pictures, and most surprisingly empty pages, labeled Madison's Adventures, waiting to be filled. We've missed too much already, my father said, meeting my gaze with regret in his eyes. We'd like to be part of her life, your lives moving forward, if you'll allow it. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation with tearful embraces and all hurts instantly healed. Real life rarely works that way. Instead, it was a quiet beginning, a tentative step toward a new kind of relationship built on honesty, respect, and the recognition that family bonds must be earned rather than assumed. Later that night, after all our guests had departed and Madison was getting ready for bed, she handed me a small package wrapped in newspaper comics and secured with an abundance of tape. "I made this for you," she said, watching expectantly, as I carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a handmade card, the front covered, with a drawing of two figures, one tall, one small, standing together beneath a bright Sunday. Inside, in her careful printing, she had written, "To my real mom, thank you for always fighting for me." I pulled her into a hug, my heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "Thank you for teaching me what's worth fighting for," I whispered against her hair. As Madison drifted off to sleep that night, I reflected on the journey we had traveled since that fateful wedding day. The path had been painful at times, the confrontations difficult, the realizations uncomfortable. But through it all, we had emerged stronger, more confident in our identities and in our definition of family. I had learned that standing up for what matters isn't a single moment of courage, but a daily practice. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but rather choosing to move forward with clearer boundaries and expectations. That family isn't a static concept defined by others, but a living, evolving connection that we actively create and nurture. And Madison had learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that her worth wasn't determined by others' acceptance, that she didn't need to earn her place in the world or apologize for who she was. She had watched her mother refuse to accept anything less than respect and dignity for them both, and in doing so had absorbed a powerful truth that would serve her throughout her life. Sometimes the family you fight for becomes the family you truly deserve. And in that fight, I didn't just teach my daughter her worth, she taught me mine. If you've ever had to stand up for someone you love against family pressure, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you find the courage to speak your truth? Remember to like this video if Madison and my journey resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that family is about love, not labels. Thank you for being part of our extended family here, and may you always know your true worth.